Okay guys, this is a recording. First time I've tried it on this one, so we'll see how it works. If you're ready for the next part of your packet, which is standard 6.25, then you should be watching this video. It's about ancient India, and the standard says, explain how the major beliefs and practices of Brahmanism in India evolved into early Hinduism. So we're looking at two aspects here. We're looking at Brahmanism, and we're looking at Hinduism. And I'm sorry this is sloppy. I'm using my mouse and my screen to try to draw these lines. So, alright, so the first thing that you're going to have to do then is we need to compare these two beliefs. So, the first part says, explain how the major beliefs and practices of Brahmanism in India evolved. How did it evolve into early Hinduism? So first we're going to get this straight. I want you to draw a T-chart. Alright, so on one of those pieces of paper that you have that should already be labeled 6.25, you're going to draw a T-chart. Ooh, that's terrible. Okay. Alright, on one side, actually I want my T-chart to look like this. Let me just start over. Okay, this is how I want your T-chart to look. And on one side, we're going to write Brahmanism. Alright, one side's going to say Brahmanism, the other side will say Hinduism. And we're going to label our chart Religions in Ancient India. Alright, we're going to be taking notes about Brahmanism and Hinduism. So, as I write down through here, you're going to be writing the same notes. Alright, so you should be ready. Here we go. Okay, we're going to look back at the slide that we were on that says Brahmanism. It was an early religion in the Indian subcontinent brought in by the Aryan people that was based on Vedic writing called the Vedas. Brahmanism, the Brahmins, which are priests, were the only people in ancient India who could carry out the religious ceremonies required by the Veda. So we're gonna draw some notes out of there that we're gonna add back to our chart. So first of all, we're going to tell where this came from. Alright, so Brahmanism. First note, it was brought to the Indian subcontinent by the Aryans. Alright, now mine's probably going to bleed over a little bit into Hinduism. See if I can fix that. Alright, and I'm going to be putting these notes on and then erasing them so you can pause it anytime you need to. Brahmanism was brought to the Indian subcontinent by the Aryans. Okay, the next part of our note says that it was based on the Vedic writing called the Vedas. So we're going to put in that in our notes as well. Okay, I've added that to my notes. That was based on the Vedic writing called the Veda. Now the Vedas, in case you haven't heard this already, which I think you did in your guided notes, but I'm not sure. I'm going to tell you anyways. The Vedas were written in Sanskrit. The Vedas were Aryan hymns or stories or poems and prayers that were written down and recorded and collected into sacred texts. Those sacred texts were called the Vedas. So some examples of the Vedas remain today. The prayer in the Veda asks for divine help in the offering of sacrifices, or at least in your book on page 146 in your green book, the prayer that it's talking about is, let us invoke or call upon today to aid our labor the Lord of speech. May he hear kindly all of our invocation, which is prayers, who gives us all bliss for aid, whose works are righteous. So that prayer asks for divine help in offering sacrifices. So the Vedas were sacred texts written in Sanskrit that were brought over by the Aryans. Alright, next note we're going to put, we're going to switch back to this and see if there's anything else we need here. Brahmanism, or the Brahmins, were priests, and they were the only people in ancient India who could carry out religious ceremonies. So we're going to add that to our notes as well. Alright, so I have my note here. Brahmins, or priests, were the only people in ancient India that could carry out religious ceremonies. They were considered members of the Varna. The Varna is one of the social classes in ancient India, and the priests were considered the most powerful in that caste system. And we haven't talked about the caste system in India yet, but we will. So they were the only ones who could carry out religious ceremonies. Alright, moving back to our slide now. Let's see if there's anything else that we need. They were the only people in ancient India who could carry out religious ceremonies required by the Veda. Okay, so according to the slide, I think that we've got notes that we need for Brahmanism. So now we're going to move to Hinduism. Alright, Hinduism, down here, Hinduism developed from the faith of the Aryan people, Brahmanism. It includes many beliefs and practices. The core belief of Hinduism is that that should be one, sorry, right here. This should be one. That there is one universal spirit called Brahman. Hinduism is the third largest religion after Christianity and Islam. Alright, so we're going to flip back over here to our chart on Hinduism, and we're going to make some notes on that as well. Okay, so my first note says that Hinduism was developed from the faith of the Aryan people. That faith was Brahmanism. So Hinduism came directly out of the faith that the Aryans brought over, which was Brahmanism. Okay, my next note. Hinduism has many beliefs and many different practices within their religion. So it's a complex religion. Now I'm going to tag this note on along with Hinduism having many beliefs and practices, and I'm going to tell you that the core belief of Hinduism is that there is one universal spirit. That one universal spirit is called Brahman. So Brahman is the one universal spirit that Hinduism, that the belief and the practices of Hinduism, it's their core belief, is that Brahman is one universal spirit. All right. Going to go back to our slide here. We have that it has many beliefs and practices, that there's one universal spirit called Brahman, and we also need to know this one right here. Hinduism is the third largest religion after Christianity and Islam. So we're going to put that on our slide as well. Okay. Hinduism is the third largest religion after Christianity and Islam. Alright, so once you get that note written, we're going back to this slide again and see if there's anything that we've forgotten. Developed from the faith of the Aryan, which was Brahmanism, includes many practices and beliefs. The core belief is that there's one universal spirit called Brahman, and Hindu is the third largest religion after Christianity and Islam. Alright, so we're going to move on to our next slide then. This is going to tell us, and I'm going to move these pictures out of the way so that I can show you what I'm talking about as I bring them in. Alright, so let's just slide those out of the, well, maybe we'll slide that one out of the way. I guess maybe we won't. I suppose he's not going to cooperate. Alright, well, we'll just leave him right there. Alright. The Aryans lived in tribes led by a Raja. Okay, a Raja is simply a prince. Okay, the Rajas created their own small kingdoms, and they fought over cattle, over treasure, and over, of course, what else? Land. The Rajas had no written language, so at this time Sanskrit wasn't around. Till after they settled in villages, and then they developed Sanskrit. So they were responsible for developing it, but at first before they were settled, they had no written language, but they were the ones who developed Sanskrit. This was a way to keep records, so it was a record keeping. Those records were of sales, trade, land ownership, and etc., things such as that. The language was eventually used to write hymns, stories, poems, and prayers. Okay, later these prayers that we've talked about, and we just talked about a minute ago, they were recorded and collected into sacred texts called the Veda, and we just talked about that one just a minute ago. So the Aryans, led by a Raja, which was a prince, created their own small kingdoms. They did fight over cattle, land, treasure. They had no written language until they settled in their villages, and they developed Sanskrit. Sanskrit was a way for them to keep records of sales and trades, ownership. Eventually, they wrote down stories and hymns and poems and prayers, and the prayers were recorded and collected into what was called Veda. Now, this is a picture, if I can get a hold of it here. Whoops, hang on. Okay, this right here is a picture of one of the Rajas that would have come over. He was an Aryan, would have come over as a prince and created his own kingdom. And this that I was sliding up here a second ago, this is what Sanskrit looks like. So I'm actually going to enlarge it a little bit on the screen for you. Okay, just so you can see. I'll erase some of this highlighting so you can see it. This is Sanskrit, and we're actually going to be writing our name in Sanskrit very shortly, but that's what Sanskrit looks like. Think you can do that? We're going to find out, I suppose. Okay, we're moving on to our next slide. Explain how the major beliefs and practices, remember, we are trying to explain the major beliefs and practices of Brahmanism and how that evolved. This is our key word right here, evolved. How did it evolve into Hinduism? Alright, Hinduism developed from the faith of the Aryans and the sacred writings of the Veda. So Hinduism developed from the faith that the Aryans brought over. What was that faith? That faith was Brahmanism. And they took that from the sacred writings of the Vedas. At first, the Vedas had to be memorized by the Brahmin priests. Now, if you remember, I told you the Brahmin priests were on the top of the caste system. Those priests had to memorize the Veda. They had to memorize the writings that were in the Veda, and they had to speak them out loud to the people. Now, over time, the Aryan religion changed because it blended with the ideas of the other peoples that were in India. Now, we talked about just the other day when the Aryans came in, and I hope that you remember what they came in through. They came in through a pass. I am trying to write that here. I hope that you can guess it. Oh, did you guess it? Khyber Pass. Khyber Pass was in the Hindu Kush Mountains. The Aryans came in through that pass, and they made their way into India. Now, the people of Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa were beginning to leave their towns, their cities, their villages, and the archaeologists and scientists believe that was because of natural disasters, earthquakes, typhoons, flooding. But there were still people in India. And if you remember from my map, and I'm going to see if I can find it here. Yep, here it is. If you remember from the map that I showed you, the people that came in, the Aryans that came in through the Hindu Kush Mountains, through the Khyber Pass, they made their way deep into India. They did not just stay in the northeast. They made their way into India. So they met up with a lot of other people. And instead of everybody just changing to be one culture or the other, they blended. And because of that blending, we have the Brahmin religion turning to the Hindu religion. Alright, so over time the Aryan religion changed as it blended with the ideas of other peoples of India. This mix of beliefs became known as, you got it, Hinduism. Alright, so Hinduism is derived out of Brahmanism. Okay? Alright, now we're going to take a look here at our next slide. This is the origins of Hinduism that I found that another teacher had done. Alright, the Vedism, which is taken from the Vedas, means knowledge. So you might want to go back to your T-chart now and write down that the Brahmins were the ones who had the Veda in Sanskrit. Okay, so I've added this note. The Vedas, sacred text written in Sanskrit, brought over by the Aryans. It means, whoops, I have a typo here. It means knowledge. So you need to add that to your note on Brahmanism. So anytime you need to pause because I'm going to keep going. Now for hundreds of years, these sacred texts, these hymns and verses and prayers, they were taught orally. They were passed down for hundreds and hundreds of years by storytelling. Alright, the Brahmins, which you know hopefully by now, are the priests. They were priests and religious scholars. They were the ones who interpreted the Veda. So they were the ones who spoke out to the people in the land what the Veda said and what it meant. They were also the only ones who could perform religious ceremonies or rituals that the Vedas called for. They became a dominant class in India. I told you this. They were on top of the caste system. So the Brahmin were on top of the caste system in India, which is the social hierarchy. The Vedas, or Vedism, is called Brahmanism. Now, modern day Hinduism, it is very complex. There's many different beliefs. There's many forms of worship. And there's many deities that exist side by side. When I'm talking about deities, I'm talking about gods and goddesses. So we're going to go back to our slide and we're going to add that one in as well. Okay, so I added several notes here. I put that Hinduism is very complex. Whoops, sorry about that. It has many different beliefs. And there's many deities. So when we're talking about many deities, we would probably be safe to say that because of many deities, they were polytheistic. All right, we're going to switch back here to our slide that we were on. They did share certain beliefs. They shared the belief that the Veda was to remain sacred. So we're going to add that one to our T chart as well. Okay, so I added that note in. The one thing that they did have a same belief in was the Vedas was to remain sacred. It was to remain holy. It was to remain the book that they used for their sacred teachings. All right, we're going to flip back to our chart here, moving right along. So we're going to sum it up now. All right, so here we go. The Aryans worshipped nature gods, which represented, goodness, I can't read, which represented such things as rain, the ocean, and the sun. Okay, so hopefully you're following along with me. Their most important gods were Shiva, Indra, Varuna, and... Okay, I had to check the pronunciation on that one because I was afraid that I would just totally slaughter it. It is Surya. Alright, so these were their gods. So as you can see, there's several, so that would mean that we would list them as being polytheistic. Indra was both the god of war and the storm god. Sacrifices to the gods was an important part of the Aryan religion, which we call Brahmanism. Brahmanism was brought to us by whom? The Aryans. The priests, called Brahmins, were responsible for conducting the religious rituals correctly. So they were the ones that were responsible for conducting religious rituals, and they had to do so correctly. If they failed to do so, the Aryans believed their gods would not answer their prayers. So basically, if the Brahmins messed up and did something incorrectly, then they thought that the gods would not answer the prayers. Then there might be floods, famine, disease, or other natural disasters. People paid the Brahmins to make these sacrifices and to conduct the rituals. Over time, the Brahmins came up with more and more rules about the sacrifices and rituals. What does that tell you? Brahmins also taught the idea of an afterlife. Over hundreds of years, the Aryans' ideas of Brahmanism blended with the ideas of people already living in the Indus Valley. So the people that were there, they blended with their ideas that they had. These ideas formed a set of beliefs. Okay, so they formed a set of beliefs and practices known as what? Hinduism. Like the Aryans, Hindu, people who follow Hinduism, believe that people were born into a particular social class. Alright, so they believe you were born in a social class. Their social class is called a caste. So India has a caste system. They also believed in an afterlife. Unlike Aryans, however, Hindus believed in reincarnation. Alright, so Hindus believe in reincarnation. This says unlike Aryans, so that tells us that the Aryans probably did not believe in reincarnation. If you don't know what reincarnation is when you are born, you die, and then you are born again. Alright, this meant that Hindus believed that people in a lower caste were being punished for their sins that they had committed in their earlier life. So basically, if you lived in a low caste, you were in low social hierarchy, you were low on their pyramid, then the Hindus believed that you were being punished for the sins that you committed from the life that you lived before. So basically that means you would have been a bad person, you did bad things you died, and when you were born again, you were born into a lower caste. So they believed that those people were being punished for their sins. Hindus believe that if people accepted their position in life and lived correctly, they would be reborn into a higher caste in their next life. The Hindus believed in many different gods. There you go. That tells us that they're polytheistic. But the chief god was Brahman, Brahman the priest. The other gods were different faces of Brahman. For example, Shiva was the face of Brahman the destroyer. Hindus believed Brahman's major powers were to create, preserve, and destroy. All right, let's move on to our next slide. Okay, this is going to lead us to, I think, probably the back or the next page of your booklet that you're doing. Since I'm not there today, I don't have a booklet with me here at night to see what it is that, I can't remember right off the top of my head if it's the next page or if it's the back of your T-chart. But either way, on a piece of paper, you're going to write question number 2. And I want you to explain to me how the beliefs and practices of Brahmanism evolved into Hinduism. Now, this is going to require you to write a paragraph. So I want a well-written paragraph, not a cheesy one, not one that has sentences that are, just 2 or 3 sentence paragraph. No, I want at least 7 or more sentences. Now, you're talking about here the evolution of Brahmanism. Whoops. Sorry about that. You're talking about the evolution of Brahmanism to Hinduism. So you can go back and you can watch this video again. You can go back to your notes. You can go back to certain slides. You can go back wherever you want to figure out how this evolution came to pass. But basically, Hinduism wasn't always Hinduism. It evolved out of Brahmanism. And I want you to tell me what the key word here is, and that is how. How did those beliefs evolve from Brahmanism into Hinduism? All right. Now, after you do that, then we will start standard 6.26, which will be on another video. And hopefully I will be back with you tomorrow and we can get started on this in person. But if not, I'm going to do a video just in case you get this one done today and you need to go ahead and start it. All right. So, see you later. Bye.